In the history of funk bass, some players became worldwide symbols. Their names are immediately connected with legendary recordings and unforgettable grooves. But there are musicians whose influence traveled through another path. They were not always the face of the movement, but their playing was studied by other musicians who understood exactly what they were hearing. Bobby Vega is one of those players. For decades, he carried the tradition of deep pocket funk, the powerful sound of the Fender Precision Bass, and the musical language created by artists like Sly Stone and Larry Graham. He played with legends, inspired generations of bassists, and became known as one of the most authentic voices of old-school funk. But why does a musician so respected by professional players remain relatively unknown outside the bass world? The answer reveals a story about groove, dedication, and a style of playing that can never be replaced by technology. Before we continue, subscribe now, like this video, comment, and share. When people talk about the golden era of funk, they often mention the singers, the horn sections, and the musicians who stood at the front of the stage. But the foundation of that music was always created by the rhythm section. The bass was the connection between the drums and the melody. It was the heartbeat. During the late 1960s and 1970s, artists like Sly and the Family Stone, James Brown, Parliament Funkadelic, and Tower of Power changed the way musicians thought about rhythm. The bass was no longer just supporting the harmony. It became a voice. Bobby Vega grew up surrounded by that musical revolution. Coming from the Bay Area, a region known for its unique combination of funk, soul, rock, and experimental music, Vega developed a style deeply connected to the musicians who created that era. His approach was not based on chasing complicated techniques. It was built around feel, the ability to make a simple note sound powerful. The understanding that timing, tone, and attitude could transform an entire song. Throughout his career, Vega became recognized as one of the strongest representatives of traditional funk bass, a player who understood where the music came from and how to keep that spirit alive. Bobby Vega was born in Northern California, a region that became one of the most important musical centers in America during the 1960s and 1970s. The Bay Area was experiencing a cultural explosion. Rock, soul, funk, and jazz were crossing paths, creating an environment where young musicians could discover completely different sounds within the same city. Like many bass players from his generation, Vega was influenced by what he heard on the radio and records. The grooves coming from Motown, Stax Records, James Brown, and the emerging funk movement showed him that the bass could be much more than a background instrument. The players who shaped his musical thinking were musicians who understood space. They knew when to play and when silence created more impact than additional notes. That philosophy became central to Vega's style. Instead of treating the bass as a competition for attention, he learned to make it serve the music. One of the instruments that became closely associated with his identity was the Fender Precision Bass. The Precision had already become the voice of countless soul and rock recordings. Players such as James Jamerson and Donald "Duck" Dunn had proven its power. Vega continued that tradition, developing a tone that combined strength, warmth, and unmistakable groove. Before gaining recognition among bass players, Bobby Vega had to develop his musical identity in the demanding environment of live performance. The Bay Area music scene required versatility. A musician could move from funk to soul, from rock to R&B, sometimes in the same night. Those experiences helped shape Vega into a complete musician. He learned that great bass playing was not only about technique, It was about understanding different styles and knowing how to communicate with other musicians. During these early years, he absorbed the lessons of the great rhythm sections that came before him. The influence of players like Larry Graham was especially important. Graham had transformed the role of bass through his groundbreaking slap technique with Sly and the Family Stone and Graham Central Station. But Vega's own path developed differently. While he respected innovation, he focused on the power of traditional groove. His playing emphasized clarity, tone, and the emotional connection between bass and drums. That approach eventually caught the attention of musicians who were searching for someone who understood the authentic language of funk. The opportunities that followed would place Bobby Vega alongside some of the most respected names in music, and they would reveal why so many professional bass players consider him one of the great guardians of the funk tradition. For many musicians, recognition comes after a single defining moment. For Bobby Vega, it came through years of proving himself in the places where funk music was truly built, on stages, in rehearsal rooms, and among musicians who understood the importance of a great groove. His reputation grew because other players noticed something immediately. Vega understood the language of funk. He knew that the strongest bass lines were not always the busiest ones. The power came from the relationship between the bass and drums, from the space between notes, and from the ability to make a rhythm feel natural. This approach eventually connected him with musicians from the world of classic funk and soul. One of the most important relationships in his career was with Sly and the Family Stone, one of the most influential bands in American music history. The group had already changed the sound of popular music by blending funk, rock, soul, and psychedelic influences. The bass playing of Larry Graham had helped redefine the instrument, creating a new vocabulary that influenced generations. For Vega, being connected with that musical tradition was not simply another opportunity. It was a responsibility. He understood that the music carried a history. The goal was not to imitate the past, but to respect the foundation while bringing his own voice. That mindset became a major part of his identity as a musician. Bobby Vega's career is filled with collaborations that demonstrate the respect he earned among musicians. Rather than being known for one commercial hit, his reputation was built through countless performances and recordings where his musical instincts made a difference. His connection with the Bay Area funk community placed him near some of the most important names in the genre. He worked with artists connected to the world of soul, R&B, gospel, and funk, including members and associates of legendary groups. One of the most important aspects of Vega's career has been his dedication to preserving the sound of classic funk. At a time when many productions were moving toward programmed drums, digital sounds, and highly processed recordings, Vega continued celebrating the human feel of musicians playing together. The slight variations in timing, the movement of a real groove, the character of an instrument pushed through an amplifier. Those details mattered. His love for vintage equipment, especially the Fender Precision Bass, became part of his musical identity. For Vega, the instrument was not just a tool. It was connected to a historical sound that shaped generations of recordings. The deep tone of the precision bass had been heard on countless soul, rock, and funk classics. Vega became one of the musicians who kept that tradition alive, showing younger players why the combination of a great bass, a great amplifier, and a strong pocket could still compete in a modern musical world. What makes Bobby Vega's playing special is not complexity. It is understanding. His style comes from a tradition where the bass player and drummer create a conversation. Every note has a purpose. Every pause has meaning. This philosophy connects him to some of the greatest rhythm section players in history. Musicians like James Jamerson, Donald "Duck" Dunn, and Larry Graham all understood that a bass line could define the personality of a song. Vega followed that same principle. His playing combines the weight of traditional soul bass with the rhythmic confidence of funk. He is known for a strong right-hand technique, a powerful tone, and an ability to make a simple groove feel alive. For many younger players, there is an important lesson in his approach. Modern bass playing often focuses on speed, complexity, and technical ability. But Vega represents another type of mastery. The mastery of making people move. The mastery of knowing exactly what the music needs. The mastery of creating a bass line that listeners remember even when they do not know who played it. That understanding is why so many professional musicians respect him. Because groove cannot be measured only by technique. It has to be felt. One of the most interesting parts of Bobby Vega's career is the contrast between his reputation and his level of mainstream recognition. Among bass players, his name carries significant respect. Many musicians consider him a reference point for authentic funk playing. But outside that community, his story remains relatively unknown. That difference reflects the reality of many great musicians from the rhythm section. Their contributions are everywhere, even when their names are not always recognized. Vega has also become known as an ambassador for the history of the electric bass. Through clinics, interviews, and appearances, he has shared his knowledge about instruments, tone, and the musicians who shaped the sound of popular music. His passion for vintage basses and classic recording techniques has made him an important voice for musicians interested in understanding the roots of their craft. Another fascinating part of his journey is his relationship with the Fender Precision Bass. While many players searched for newer designs and more elaborate instruments, Vega continued exploring the possibilities of one of the most important basses ever created. His message was simple. The instrument does not create the musician. The musician creates the sound. A great player can take a familiar instrument and reveal possibilities that others never noticed. That idea represents much of Bobby Vega's career. He did not need to reinvent the bass. He reminded people why it was powerful in the first place. The history of bass is often written through the names of musicians who changed technique. But there is another kind of influence that is harder to measure. It comes from players who protect a tradition, preserve a sound, and remind future generations why certain styles became important in the first place. Bobby Vega represents that type of influence. His contribution is not based on creating a completely new technique or trying to move away from the foundations of funk. Instead, he became one of the musicians who kept the original spirit of the genre alive. For younger bassists discovering funk, his playing became a lesson in musical priorities. The importance of tone, the connection between bass and drums, the ability to create movement without filling every space. In an era where many players focused on technical complexity, Vega showed that simplicity, when played with authority, could be just as powerful. His approach helped remind musicians that some of the greatest bass lines in history were built around feeling rather than showing ability. The influence of players like Vega can be heard in musicians who study vintage funk, soul, and R&B. They are searching for the same qualities that defined the golden era of the genre. A strong pocket, a recognizable sound, a connection between the instrument and the emotion of the song. Through workshops, interviews, and conversations with musicians, Vega has continued passing that knowledge forward. He became not only a performer, but also a historian of the instrument. Someone who understands where the sound came from and why it still matters. Bobby Vega's career tells an important story about how musical legacy is created. Not every influential musician becomes a household name. Some leave their mark through the respect they earn from other artists. Among bass players, Vega's reputation has remained strong because he represents something increasingly rare: authenticity. His career has been connected to a period when musicians developed their identity through listening, playing live, and understanding the importance of the band as a complete unit. The lessons from that era continue to influence players today. Modern bassists can study thousands of techniques online, but the feeling of a great groove still comes from the same place it always did: time, taste, musical awareness. Those qualities have defined Bobby Vega's playing for decades. His relationship with the Fender Precision Bass also became part of his legacy. At a time when technology created endless possibilities for new sounds, Vega continued proving that a classic instrument in the hands of a great musician could remain timeless. The Precision Bass was already responsible for countless legendary recordings. Through players like Vega, its voice continued reaching new generations. Perhaps the most important part of his legacy is the reminder that bass does not need to dominate a song to be unforgettable. Sometimes the greatest compliment a bass player can receive is that the music would not feel the same without them. The story of Bobby Vega is a reminder that music history is not only created by the artists who appear on magazine covers. It is also shaped by musicians who dedicate their lives to mastering a language and keeping it alive. Vega represents a direct connection to the golden age of funk, a time when rhythm sections created grooves that could move entire generations, a time when the sound of a bass and drums working together could define the personality of a song. Throughout his career, Bobby Vega has carried that tradition with respect. He studied the great players who came before him. He performed with musicians who helped shape American music. And he continued sharing the lessons he learned with those who came after. His story is not about chasing fame. It is about understanding the responsibility that comes with a musical tradition. The responsibility of protecting the groove. The responsibility of respecting the musicians who built the foundation. The responsibility of reminding people that great bass playing is not measured only by how many notes are played. It is measured by how much those notes mean. For listeners who grew up with the sounds of soul, funk, and R&B, Bobby Vega's music represents something familiar, a connection to an era when every instrument had a purpose and every groove had a heartbeat. And for bass players around the world, his career stands as proof that sometimes the musicians who quietly hold the music together are the ones who leave the deepest impact. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next video.